Hello, everyone. Welcome to our new episode of Fiction in Real Life. I'm here with Heather B. Moore and Jennifer Moore, and I am Julie Daines. And we are so grateful that you could join us. Today, we are, as usual, having a giveaway, and this giveaway is a new book by Rebecca Connolly called Hidden Yellow Stars. I have loved all of her books, so I'm super excited to read this one. I haven't yet. But it just sounds really amazing. So if you want a chance to win that, just leave a comment here or on our YouTube channel, and we pick a winner usually within maybe 5 or 6 days. So we have a great episode today because March is Women's History Month. And so we have picked a couple of interesting women from history that we wanted to talk about today. So let's just jump right in. Maybe we'll have Heather Moore go first.
Okay, great. So I chose a woman named Nancy Harkness Love, and it's actually someone that I wrote a historical novel on that comes out in September. So I know a lot about her, but I still had to look stuff up because I wrote the book like about a year ago. Anyway, but so she was a pilot. So she actually started flying when she was 16 years old. She went up in a barnstormer plane. She had this guy came to her town in Michigan and was flying around, and he had to pay a couple dollars to go up. So she went up and she loved it. So she begged her parents to take flying lessons, and they let her. Anyway, so she finishes high school and college, and she's still flying as much as she can. And then after she graduates, she is actually, it's kind of the Great Depression era. So her family loses a lot of money in the stock market. So she decides she's going to become a secretary. So she goes to secretary school, and she ends up meeting her husband to be, and he owns an airfield. And so this is awesome because then she goes to work for him, and she gets lots of hours, and she keeps getting more experience. And then when World War II breaks out and America ends up entering the war, she pitches a program to the government, which is for women aviators to be the ones that will bring the bombers that are being built off the manufacturing plant and ferry them to the air bases where the men can then train on them for combat. So this saves like thousands and thousands and thousands of hours if the women do that one job. So she begins this program called the WAIFs, and then another lady named Jackie Cochran, she is over the training of the aviators, and eventually the whole program is called the WASP. So a lot of people have heard of the WASP, which is Women Aviator Service Pilots. I'm like, what does it mean? I know what it means. Anyway, so she was just very spunky. She was also very nice and very fair. But she had a lot of red tape to get through. One thing that the overseers didn't want the women to fly when they're menstruating because they felt like they were too moody and they wouldn't make good decisions. So she had to fight against that. They wouldn't let women fly when they're pregnant. So when the women were pregnant, they could fly till maybe about 3 or 4 months along, because then they couldn't really fit in the cockpits anymore. And the cockpits were very, very small. But she's the first one who flew almost every bomber in America. She flew like the P-51 Mustang, the B-25, the Flying Fortress. So she was the first woman to fly all these planes. And the reason she was so dedicated to make sure she learned to check out on them is so that then other women would do it. And she also did it so that some of the men that were a little unsure about flying, would fly those planes too, because some of them were a little sketchy when they're first being built. Anyway, so she's kind of an interesting character. And I don't know, I just feel like she really did a lot, especially for women in aviation down the road.
Cool. Okay. Well, I mean, it's a weird question if I ask Heather if she'll book it because she already did.
Yes. I booked it in the past tense.
Yeah. So when does it come out? Tell us about it.
In September. So it's all done. It's been through all the edits, and it's, I think it's going to be out in ARC form in the next couple of weeks.
Cool. So cool. Well, I cannot wait to read it. I'm very excited because I've been hearing about it for a while now, and I'm super excited. But since it's already been booked, and I'm sure that Heather has done an amazing job, I will probably not choose to book it. How about you, Jennifer?
Well, I can't because of Heather, but if there is another woman pilot, I love that era. It reminds me so much of my grandparents. My grandpa was a test pilot like that. And, just seeing those pictures, I'm like, oh, that looks just like a little hat my grandma would have worn, and the hairstyles and everything. I love
Yeah.
that great time period. So I don't know. Also, World War II is a hard era to write about. So I don't know. I'm back and forth. I'm this.
Right. Okay. Awesome. Jennifer, what's your story?
Okay. So the woman I chose is Nellie Bly. So her real name when she was born is Elizabeth Cochrane Seaman, but she shortened it to Nellie Bly because it was a pen name, and she's a journalist. So the way that she kind of got her name out there was she did a record-breaking trip around the world, and it was well documented, and she talked about all these neat things she had seen. And it was, back at a time when people didn't really, in the early turn of the century, when people didn't really travel around the world or travel at all. And so, everybody was getting the newspaper and wanting to read about her adventures that she had and all these different cultures that she experienced and everything. She wrote some investigative articles, like about lives of factory workers and like how people were mistreated and things like that. But she found it was really hard to keep a job as a journalist because she was a woman, and a lot of the newspapers just wouldn't even talk to her. So finally, she decided she needed to do something that was different enough and I guess like groundbreaking enough that she would for sure keep her job, and that the newspapers would want to hire her and keep her. And the newspaper she worked for is called The World, and I don't know where it is. I think it's in New York. So I'm sorry if I am saying that wrong. But anyway, so what she did is she stayed up all night. She came up with this plan. She stayed up all night. So she kind of had this like, red eyes and kind of puffy face. And she checked into this boarding house and kind of started acting nutso. She was kind of wandering around and saying things like people were watching her. And what her plan is for someone to think that she was so at the time they said insane or crazy, but now we would say had a mental illness. But she wanted someone to think she was insane and take her to Blackwell Island. And Blackwell Island is where people were sent and just sent away from their families. And any kind of, you could have your family member committed there if the doctors said that they were legally insane. And everybody kind of had heard rumors about it. No one really knew what went on there. And so Nellie is now undercover and she's at Blackwell Island. She said that the minute she got there, after she had kind of, she had to kind of act weird to get in. But as soon as she got there, she acted totally like herself, completely sane, but no one believed her. She had medical experts, interview her and study her, and everybody said, nope, she's crazy. She's insane. She needs to be here. Anyway, and what she found, she just like blew the lid off this whole thing. It was underfunded. So the people that were hired were not like doctors and nurses who were really great in their field. They were people that, didn't know what they were doing, or they couldn't get jobs other places because they weren't good workers, or, whatever reason. They weren't the top of the line employees. The food was really bad, and not just like it wasn't yummy. It was horrible. It was rotten. Mm-hmm. They didn't have enough money to have good food. So the staff there and the doctors and everybody, they had pretty good food, but the patients who couldn't do anything about it, it's not like they could protest or send a letter to the manager or whatever. They had moldy, rotten food. They were sick all the time. People there were, when you eat bad food, you have diarrhea, or, you're malnourished, or whatever. They were just sick all the time. And then the nurses and the other orderlies and people there were really cruel to the people. They were abused emotionally and physically and mentally and sexually. And anyway, so there was one, just one thing that I read about that I'll tell you that she said is that she would spend her days. So she was in there for 10 days before she finally got a hold of the newspaper and was like, get me the heck out of here. But they would take her and the group of women that were kind of like in her ward, or I don't know how they organized the hospital, but and they would sit on a bench all day with a guard watching them, and they couldn't do anything. They couldn't talk. They couldn't fall asleep. They couldn't wiggle around. They couldn't shift. That was their day. And they were just kind of, like tortured. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So anyway, so Nellie gets out of there, and she kept, she was worried about all the people that she had met and kind of become friends with, because they couldn't just say, okay, this is enough. I call my newspaper and get me out of here. They're stuck in there. But her expose that she wrote, it was called 10 Days in a Madhouse. She wrote it, first of all, for the newspaper in like little articles, and people were eating it up. They, nobody had any idea what was going on there. And then it came out as a book. But after the government, I don't know, whoever's in charge of sending money to Blackwell Island, it brought about this major reform. Their budget got revamped, and they had good doctors, and the people got good food and actual care for their mental health and everything. So she really made a huge difference with her. And she's like the first journalist to go undercover and do something like that. People do that now a little, more, and we hear about stuff like that, but she was the first one to do it. So that is why I just think she's the cool woman I wanted to talk about today, Nellie Bly.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Well, I will say that I would definitely want to book that story. At least I would want to read it. I mean, I was like already on the edge of my seat. Like, what's going to happen in this insane asylum? What's going to happen? There's a lot of tension right there. So that would make a really great story. And probably, I think, Jennifer, you should write that book.
I'm
so
sure.
Would you book it? Let's ask you.
I mean, she did write her own book about it.
So does she have like an autobiography or something?
Just 10 Days in the Madhouse. 10 Days in a Madhouse, something like that. And so, yeah, I would book it. I think she's cool. Maybe I would have to change the story around a little so I didn't, plagiarize Nellie's story. So it might have to be another woman that went undercover somewhere. But what a cool, and what like danger. It's not like she could take out her cell phone and call someone. She was like in there.
That sounds super scary. Honestly, that sounds really scary to me.
Yeah, really scary.
Heather, what about you?
Yeah, I think if I booked it, I actually kind of looked into her, and I read one book on her. I think it was just kind of a historical novel about her. But if I was to do it, I'd probably take like another character and put it in the story and have that character be in this institution, and also be maybe put there against her will. Because I know that, and I don't know if this is happening at Blackwell, but they would do like experiments and stuff, like not necessarily just to experiment, but to try to like help their whatever, illness they're going
like weird
through.
lobotomy type stuff.
Yeah. So I think if I wrote it, I probably wouldn't have, Nellie would be one of the characters, and have maybe another character or two as well in there. Because I feel like when I did kind of look her up, there were quite a few books on her. And like you said, she had already kind of written her story. So how to make it kind of bring more parts of the story into what she went through.
Yeah, and I don't think it's hard to get put in there. There were some people that were in there because they didn't speak English. And so people were like, well, I can't even understand this crazy person, stick them in the institution.
Well, and you just think of all the mental health and all the different, things that we are aware of today that they weren't back then. So even if you just had, something like depression, like they would consider that as, oh, you need to go away because you're, you're not functioning like everybody else is right now. So yeah.
It's hard. Good story. Okay, I'm just gonna talk quickly about this woman. Her name, I'm not really good with French. I had one semester in junior high. Her name is Émilie du Châtelet. But we're just gonna call her Emily, so I don't keep blowing it. But anyway, she was born in 1706, and she lived in France, and she is famous for being a woman mathematician and physics expert. And some of the things that she's done were she took Sir Isaac Newton's works and translated them into French in a way that kind of actually expounded a little bit and really clarified a lot of Newton's ideas. She wrote her own book called, well, she wrote a lot of stuff, but her principal work is called Foundations of Physics. She had a lot of ideas about the solar system that turned out to be true, about the density of planets. She married this guy, a marquis, and it was an arranged marriage, right? So I don't think there is really any love there. And she gave birth to 3 of his children, and then she said, my duties here are done. And then what she's actually kind of most famous for, a little bit sadly, because this is certainly not her greatest contribution, is being a longtime mistress of Voltaire, the French philosopher, literary guy. So anyway, she kind of did get buried a little bit for a while in history because of her relationship with Voltaire. But she really actually was a very forward-thinking woman and really did a lot in the way of physics and mathematics. She figured out the colors of the sun, like I said, the density of the planets. She was kind of tall and maybe a little bit more sturdily built. And so I see her as the ultimate nerd because everyone said she was like really clumsy. So super brilliant, but also just a little clumsy and kind of, I don't know. So anyway, there's this cute story of her where she was at a cafe. There's a cafe in France where a lot of these men would go to philosophize about physics and mathematics and stuff like that. And she tried to go in so she could talk with them, but they turned her away. So she went home, scrounged up some men's clothing, and went back so that she could go in and just talk with the men about, the stuff that she wanted to talk about, stuff that interested her, the stuff that I could not really carry on a very good conversation about because it's really in depth. She's the one who figured out, she took, is it Newton? I can't remember, but one of the main physicists of the day, their philosophy about kinetic energy, and switched it to the correct philosophy, which is kinetic energy is equal to 1/2 times the mass times the velocity squared. So anyway, that is Emily du Châtelet, the little French mathematician person. So, Jennifer, would you book it?
Yes. I love it. You just kind of sometimes get into a little rut in your head thinking everybody in history, people in that time period were all like Marie Antoinette or whatever, but there were nerdy, doofy people and, people that were really smart all everywhere. And I love, because, she didn't go to college, she probably had to learn, and maybe having her boyfriend be Voltaire, he probably got her some good books to read, and
I think she also hired her own self some mathematician
some
tutors.
tutors.
Yeah.
So she had to figure a lot of it out by herself. So what a doubly smart person, because she just had, such a less advantage. If she had been a man, they would have been like, oh, send him to whatever university. But what a great story. I love the nerdy. I think it's Amelie. Isn't that how you say that in French?
Is it Amelie?
I'm hearing it, and when I say it, I don't know if that's right.
It sounds better than what I said. So
I don't know.
Heather, what about you? Would you book it?
Yeah, I think I love those kind of stories. I think I would book something like this because I'm sure there's a lot that, like, I feel like there's a lot we do know, but I bet there's a lot we don't know that's not credited to her. So it'd be interesting to like really dig and find out, what her life was like, and even though she had this brilliant mind, how she had to still kind of exist in the parameters of her society, and sometimes dress up as a man just to go have a discussion or hear a lecture. And that happened a lot. And I feel like some of the people we've talked about, like a lot of women had to dress up like men and go do what they really wanted to do. So we're really, we have a lot of freedoms and blessings today of, as far as not that we always are 100% accepted, but we're at least allowed to go in those situations.
Yeah. So I think I would probably maybe try and book it. It would be a little complicated because her whole, relationship situation is a little off from what I would personally normally write. But she is, I think I agree. She's a real inspiration for a person that wasn't able to go to college and do all that stuff. Her translation of Isaac Newton is still, I think, the one that they use today as the best translation. So it's kind of cool. She's got like a school named after her now and all this kind of stuff. So I don't know. And I love I love the science nerds. That's my people. So yeah. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. And don't forget to comment to win a copy of Rebecca Connolly's book, Hidden Yellow Stars. And also, it would be really great if you could like and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. But anyway, yeah, thanks for joining us for this episode of Fiction in
Real
Life.